We laugh. We cry. We learn. But really, what doesn't kill you makes you better at managing clients and everyone. I'm Morgan Friedman, and this is Client Horror Stories. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of Client Horror Stories. I'm being wild and crazy tonight, breaking my discipline and protocol because I'm going right from the intro get to know you call to the recording. That is how great our intro call has been. It's great to meet you and to record you, Spencer.
Morgan, great to meet you, man. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm excited.
Okay, cool. So now with my coffee in hand and my I Need My Space Nassau mug in hand as well, and some whiskey in here, whiskey and coffee, I am excited to hear the story that you just hinted at moments ago. Tell us about your craziest client horror stories, Spencer.
Wow, this is going to be painful to recount but I did learn a lot from it. So a while ago, I won't say how old I am, but in my younger years, I was an aspiring real estate investor. And everybody back in those days, they wanted to own rental property. I loved real estate. I loved going out and looking at houses. So what I started doing was I started buying and selling houses. I started buying and flipping houses and wholesaling houses, which kind of got me into real estate. And I was really excited about it. But the great thing about wholesaling or flipping properties is you don't own them for very long, right? It's like you're buying them and then you're just selling them to somebody, and that investor's happy, you're happy, you make a little money. But I was convinced that in order to fulfill my real estate dream, I needed to own rental property. And so Nobody really taught me, how do you own rental property? Like, what is the best way to own rental property? What do landlords really do? I had no really clue. So I just knew.
By the way, I just want to comment on that. It's incredible to me how many people, including a younger version of myself, jump into professions truly knowing jack shit, nothing about it. And yeah, it's if I knew then what I knew now, everything would be different.
Well, it's really interesting because what happens is if you don't learn it in school, if you're not paying a tuition in school to learn something, you're going to pay a tuition somehow. You're going to pay. You're going to pay some way. It may be painful, but you're going to pay. So I agree with you.
The universe is going to teach you the lessons you need to learn. It might teach it to you in school. You might have parents like who grew up in a lifestyle learning a lesson, or maybe just in the school of hard knocks.
There's a great quote by a guy named his name is Ray Dalio, and Ray Dalio says, he says pain plus reflection equals progress. And so there's got to be pain. However, you have to reflect on it. You have to think about it. Like, what was so painful? And if you do that over and over in your life, then guess what? It equals progress. You'll grow, you'll learn.
I've never thought about it before that way. I love it. I might need to make that the subtitle of Client Horror Stories, because it's about reflecting on stories of pain.
Yeah, that comes straight from Ray Dalio. So he went through a lot of pain in his life, apparently. So I thought, I'm going to buy these rental properties. What's the worst that could happen? And so I bought a really, really great property. This was an all brick rancher, probably built in the mid 70s. This is a perfect house, 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath. We finished the basement. I really put a lot of time and effort and money into making this house look really, really good. It was in a great part of town. Unfortunately, around this time, the market started to struggle a little bit. The rental market did. And so I was kind of worried. But back in those days, there was no Zillow. So I was literally going and putting a sign in the yard, hey, house for rent. I was listing it wherever I could online. And then I probably put it in the newspaper. I don't want to date myself too bad. I don't think we were doing the newspaper by then. So I just remember marketing it, and I started getting phone calls. So these phone calls were coming to my cell phone, and I was just picking up and saying, "Hey," and what the way it works, the way I found out it works is people want to walk through that property and look at it with you. And I was like, "Okay, great, yeah." Unfortunately, this property was not close by. It wasn't like it was in my neighborhood, and I could just say, "Yeah, I'll meet you there in 5 minutes." I was driving 30 to 40 minutes out there and then back 30 or 40 minutes to show this property. And I went and showed it to one person, and they were like, "Yeah, this is nice." And I'm like, "Well, are you interested in filling out an application? I have a process." Like I knew enough that I needed to have a process to screen people to make sure I got a really good resident in there. And they were like, "No, I don't, not interested in putting an application." A couple other people came by. I went and showed it to them. They put an application. One of them didn't meet the criteria, so I couldn't rent it to them. Another person didn't want to put in an application. So after probably 4 or 5 weeks of me showing this property and not getting anybody approved, I started getting a little nervous, because every time if you have a house just sitting there without any income, you're paying the mortgage. Like I was paying the mortgage. I was paying for this house, and I wasn't providing a great house for somebody, and I wasn't getting paid. So I started getting frustrated and really kind of started getting worried. So what I did was, I remember this nice lady called me, and I was like, "Great." And she had a daughter, and they wanted to look at the property. I said, "Great. Yeah, I'd love to show it to you." So I drove out there, and she walked around, and they just raved about the property. "Oh, we love this property. Oh, this, oh, this." And I was like, "Oh, this is going really, really well." And she eventually was like, "We'd love to rent this property. And as a matter of fact, we can pay you up front like 2 or 3 months plus the security deposit." And I was like, "Really?" And she goes, "Yeah." And I thought, wow. And I started thinking, well, you know what? It would be great to go ahead and rent this and not have to really go through the screening criteria. What happens if they aren't approved? Then I'm going to have to tell them it was a woman and her daughter. I'm going to have to tell them no. And I could be showing this thing for another month. I mean, this would be a nightmare for me. And so what I did was, I was like, "Hey, you know what? They've got some money up front. I'm sure they're good for it. The rest I think they're going to be great tenants." They were super nice. And I said, "Yes, let's do it. I've got a lease." I went through the lease with them. I showed them everything. Hey, no pets, no parties, this, you have to respect your neighbors and things like that. And so I showed it to them, and they signed it right there. They gave me cash, and I was so pumped. I said, "I'm going to make a copy of this lease. I'll mail it to you, and here are the keys." I had their money. So that's the way it started. So
Okay.
nothing. I mean, it seems really good so far, and I was excited about it.
So far, based only on what you said, the only red flag I see, because I always like identifying red flags, is paying cash. Because in the United States, it's a little bit weird to pay for anything non-trivial in cash. Even if this is 20 years ago, because you said it was pre-Zillow, so I'm trying to figure out how old you are. But even in the pre-Zillow days, it was all wires, checks. So, but that's a relatively minor red flag. There's nothing big standing out so far.
Yeah. So this was 2007, 2008, and so it was cash in our business was pretty. I agree with you. We would rather what we would rather say is, "Hey, we want a cashier's check, or we want a check, or you wire the money," right? But you're right. Nowadays, if I had a rental where somebody was paying cash, I wouldn't accept it. I would say, you need to, you can wire the funds, or you can give a check or whatever.
By the way, as a fun note, I've lived for years in South America. I've lived all around South America, and interestingly, in South America, it's a cash economy, including expensive real estate. I've bought multi-million-dollar houses in Argentina for cash. You literally show up with more than $1 million in US dollar bills. It is insane.
What?
Like, no, this is how it works. I know it's crazy because like the local currency is permanently deflationary, and there's just so much inflation that the US currency is the trusted currency, but because the bank system is utterly insane and dysfunctional, the norm is all real estate transactions are in cash US dollars.
That is crazy. That would make me nervous. Did it make you nervous walking around with $1 million cash?
No, the very first time I did it, I was flipping out. I had all these different strategies. Okay, we'll bring a bunch of different people and each one will have a different amount on them. So in case one person is robbed, there will only be one person. And then it came up with these other strategies. We'll all purposely wear terrible clothing and look really ugly. So that we're less of a target and I'll be walking down the street but after a couple of times you just get used to it.
That's really, really interesting. I would imagine I would probably be doing the same thing. I would be like driving a beat up car, wearing horrible clothing. I definitely wouldn't be like pulling up in a Lamborghini or Ferrari or anything, like a lot of the real estate investors like to do these days.
Exactly. So therefore, I'll point out paying large amounts of rent in cash is a yellow flag, unless you're from South America or the third world, where it's more the norm. So if someone does that today, I'll be like, "Are you Argentine? Yes. Okay, it's fine. But you're not Argentine. What's happening? Why are you?"
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. I didn't really think anything of it. And part of it was, I mean, even though I had been flipping and wholesaling houses, I was not an experienced landlord.
Right.
And I should have been talking to some landlords about this. And I had buddies who had rental houses. So it wasn't like I didn't have access to it. Probably a little bit of pride and a little bit of, just being young and dumb and just like, hey, I know what I'm doing. I'm a real estate investor, whatever. So back to the story. It was just a few months in, and rent started to become late. And that's also a yellow flag.
Yes.
Right? I would even say this, now that I know what I know, Morgan, I would even say that somebody paying several months up front is a red flag. That's a red flag because what they're attempting, sometimes they may be attempting to convince you to bypass your typical screening process. If they're showing you that, hey, I've got a lot of money, I'm ready to do it.
By the way, just because I have a lot of experience renting in South America, I'll point out on the other side, on the side of the renter, I've used that technique for that exact reason many times, because like the way it works in Argentina, for example, is you need a guarantor, but the difference is in the US, a guarantor is a person who's willing to sign for you. But in Argentina, for example, a guarantor is a piece of property, like a piece of property that has no lien or debt or anything on it. And each piece of property can be the guarantor for only one
other property,
for only one rental. And the value of the property has to be greater than the value of the rental. So as a result, me 20 years younger, when I was just exploring South America, like I didn't have anyone that had a property that could be a guarantor. So I employed the trick saying, oh my God, but rent here is so crazy cheap. I'll just offer them the first 6 months up front in a way to get around the guarantor requirement. So yes. So
did it work? Did you do that?
Yeah.
It worked. Okay.
I even once paid an entire year up front because not only did that give them complete confidence, literally, I gave them all the money, but like I friggin' hate. It's the first of the month. I need to like go pay this person, pay this person. I'm like, just don't want to think about it for a year. So it was win-win because rents were cheap enough because it was like near free basically. Then it was like not even worth thinking about the money.
I'll tell people now, I was like, just set it up for automatic draft at the first of the month and you don't have to think about it anymore, right? That's the easy way to do it.
Totally.
So I started getting kind of worried, right? Because late payments usually turn into no payments, and I don't want to paint every situation like that because it's not true. However, if the person, like a telltale sign that is probably about to go south, I learned this the hard way during this experience, is that they stopped communicating with you. So they stopped communicating with me, and I was like, yikes.
Ooh,
when somebody won't
by the
call
way,
you back, that's a problem.
I just want to point out, in every single profession, no matter what you do, someone going low communication is a serious red flag.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think that's something that people don't teach or don't learn maybe in college when they're younger and growing up, is how to have hard conversations. Like, I would rather have a hard conversation and say, "Hey, listen, here's the situation. I've got a problem. I lost my job, or there's been a sickness in the family, blah, blah, blah." Whatever the reason that you can't pay, I'd rather have that conversation than avoid the conversation. It's better for everybody. And I agree, Morgan. That's, to your point. It's really, really good. It's a red flag in any situation.
In any
Well, so
situation. And by the way, no, they never teach that to you. And one of the whole objectives of this podcast is to teach lessons exactly like this one that you don't learn in school or elsewhere.
yeah, you don't learn that. And so I'm starting to get red flags. And so what I decided to do is like, listen, I've got to go, and I'm going to have a difficult conversation with these people, and I'm going to have it right to their face. I'm just going to go to the house. I mean, it's my house. And by the way, but they have a lease, so I got to respect the lease, right? I can't just I just can't go in the house. So I go and I knock, and all of a sudden, as soon as I got finished knocking, I hear barking, and I hear all these little tiny paws, like 6 or 7 chihuahuas, come screaming around the corner, barking at me. There's the door. I can't see them through the door, but there's a window right next to the door that goes all the way down the ground, and they're looking at me, barking their heads off, and I'm like, oh my goodness. I have a no pet policy. I had just redone the hardwood floors. This is not going to be good. And so I left. They didn't come to the door. They didn't answer the door. They wouldn't call me back. Went back to the house. I eventually put a note on the door. Really, what I wanted to do was just like, hey, we need to have some communication, and I'm going to give you this incredible opportunity. If you can't pay, I'm going to allow you to leave. Like, all you have to do is find another place to live and leave. Let me know. Send me a message, text me, let me know that that you're ready to do this.
So you offered that to them without insisting on collecting the missed payment?
Oh yeah, 100%. Like I had, to that point, I felt like they weren't going to catch up on back rent. Like that wasn't going to be something that they did, since they started ghosting me. And so I just knew that instead of dragging this out, like what I really didn't want to do is go through an eviction process, because it's a lengthy process and it's an expensive process. So I would rather, like, I have friends that have done cash for keys before. They will actually pay people to leave the house. So they'll say, I'll give you $500 to get out of my house.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Oh yeah. It's called cash for keys. Happens all the time.
I never TIL, you learn something new usually every day. Usually I'm the one teaching things on this podcast, but fascinating.
Yeah.
By the way, what's interesting about cash for keys is it's a good example of how arbitrary the flow of money is. Like, you would think the renter pays to the landlord, but guess what? There are also these circumstances where the landlord pays to the renter.
Correct. And the problem is, when you decide to get into real estate, you're also, I mean, it's a business, right? So there are inherent risk in business.
Yes.
No matter what business you do, there's always going to be risk. Yes. And this is just one of the risks. The resident, the tenant, is your customer. And if you've got a customer that for some reason is it's just not cooperating, then you've got problems. And the easiest way to get, to deal with this type of issue is not to go through the system. It's to say, hey, how can we solve this outside of going to court, getting the sheriff involved, throwing your stuff out on the street? I want to solve this. And so it's a win-win for both of us. You get out of my property, I can re-rent it, and you don't have an eviction on your record. Like, who in the world wants an eviction on the record? But that's not the end of the story, because they would not communicate with me. And so I called a buddy of mine, Brian
Wait, but
Miles.
hold on. You knocked on the door and their dog's there, but did they answer?
No, they did not answer. They did not
There's
answer.
no answer.
They were there. They didn't come to the door.
They were there, they
I
didn't
can't
come
go
to-
in the I
okay.
can't go in the house, right? There's landlord laws. And so I was like, hey, we'll try to communicate through text, through phone calls. I'll come back out to the property. I did all of those things. Put a note on their door. Hey, here's the situation. This is what I'm offering you. I didn't offer them cash to get out, but I did say, I won't evict, but you need to be out by Friday. And I drove by, they were not out. And so I called a buddy of mine. I said, hey, I don't really know anything about the eviction process here in town. Can you help me? And he said, yeah, I'll help you. And so I had to, ended up paying probably with between court costs, attorney fees, set out charges, probably somewhere around $1,500 is what I came out of pocket with. But but then think about the thousands of dollars of the months that I didn't get paid, right? Because I always want to believe the best about somebody. And so, month one, I'm okay. I can understand things happen in people's lives like sickness and things like that. And so sometimes they get behind on rent. That's not a big deal to me. But month two, month three, so you're talking about several thousands of dollars by the third month. And then you've got to evict. Well, guess what? An eviction process takes 4 or 5 months. You're still not getting paid.
Yes.
And you're paying the attorney and everybody else. And so it's very painful because I'm paying the mortgage. I'm paying the mortgage every month and they're not paying me. And then the whole time I'm sitting there thinking, what's the condition of my house going to be when I go back in there? These little chihuahuas, they obviously don't care. So the day finally came. I'll never forget. The day finally came for them to be evicted, for the sheriff to put them out. So all that's set up by the court and everything. And so I went out there because I wanted to be there just to lock the property up. I wanted to make sure it was locked up after they were gone. And
so
they weren't.
I have a question, just because I know nothing about the eviction process. Like, you go to court, was there a court date where they had to show up? Did they show up in court?
Correct. That's right. There's a process, and the judge is going to give them an opportunity to, defend themselves or whatever. They did not show up. And the reason they didn't show up is because they didn't really have a leg to stand on. I had a copy of the lease. I had proof that they hadn't paid. And so then they could have come and said, no, we have paid. Here's the receipt. Here are the money order, the copies of the money orders, or here are the cleared checks or whatever. They didn't have anything. And so they couldn't do that. And so my buddy Brian helped me with that whole process. And I remember standing there and watching the sheriff take their stuff to the street. They left the house with a bunch of stuff, and they didn't take everything out, but they took a lot of stuff out and set it at the bottom of the street. And then neighbors kind of walked by and took some stuff. And I thought, wow, this is a horrible way to live. I would not want to move from house to house to house. And at the end of the day, I think they were professional renters. They were essentially
professional renters.
Yeah, professional renters means that they know what they're doing. They know how long they can live in a house without paying, or live in an apartment without paying. They know the system well enough so that they just kind of go. They're looking for landlords who are rookies like I was. They don't know anything. And they're like, hey, how can we fool this rookie? We can wave some cash in his face and say, hey, look, we've got 3 months of rent. We're ready to do this.
Interesting.
So I was a sucker. It was my fault. It wasn't their fault. I shouldn't have really gotten super lax with my screening criteria. I shouldn't have. I should have just stuck to what I knew was right.
So one lesson is you got lax with your screening criteria because someone offered you a disproportionate. Someone did something trustworthy up front. I'll as a good sign, I'll give you a bunch of money up front. But that makes you relax on your sketchiness detection radar. This reminds me of the etymology of the phrase con man, where to say someone's a con man, the original framing of that was a confidence man, because it was someone who would give you confidence so you trust them, and then they rip you off after they've gained your trust.
That makes me think of the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, Catch Me If You Can. Frank
Yes.
Abagnale, right? The true story of Frank Abagnale. But that's not. But I'll say this, Morgan. That's not the only thing, right? So yes, it was the temptation of the money, but it was also combine that with the pain of going out to that property, spending an hour showing that property. Guess what? You want to start believing.
Property?
It was 30 to 40 minutes away each way. So it was like an hour every time. Plus I was spending time with people in the house. That gets frustrating. And so what happens is rookie landlords, they're like, I'm tired of going out and showing this dumb property. I'm going to relax on my screening criteria. I'm going to believe people more. And then when they show money, that's just a perfect storm. Yeah. And I've seen it happen to a lot of investors over my 20 years of real estate investing.
Interesting. By the way, what I would add to that is there's an interesting concept in economics that they call transaction costs. And when economists talk about transaction costs, they don't mean it in the particular sense of, on your credit card, there's a 3% fee for every transaction. Transaction costs in the more general economic sense is anything you do, there's just some cost to doing that thing. And it's not necessarily money. It could be like the frustration of dealing with this every time. Like if I have to deal with this relative of mine who's really annoying, then like every time doing business with this relative is like, oh my God, I need to call them and they're going to like be not nice to me. So part of the lesson here is to take into account the transaction cost and not necessarily the financial one. Like you're going to invest in real estate. Okay. You'll have to show it an average of 30 times before you rent it. And it will be 4 hours, a half workday, including the transaction cost of driving back and forth. Like just factor that into your analyses to make sure it's worth it.
100% agree with that. I mean, we call that brain damage. So there's brain damage involved.
Cash for keys.
Cash for keys and brain damage. Like, do I really want to spend brain damage? Like, I'm gonna get brain damage thinking about this. And so I was, so you start adding up all those costs, and it really doesn't make sense. But I will say, it's more, Morgan, in hindsight, of course, 15 years past all this, in hindsight, it really is. It's the tuition you pay, right? So part of sometimes you got to get your teeth kicked in before you realize that like maybe this isn't what I want to do, or maybe this is what I want to do, and the pain was worth it because I learned so much. It's going to be a lot easier next time.
I want to make an unusually personal point here. Your story resonates with me in an interesting way because, to use the language that you've taught me over the course of our podcast, my grandfather was a professional renter. I never knew that phrase existed. I didn't know my genetic grandfather. This is my mother's father. But what I did know is that between my mom's birth until she was 18 and went to college, they moved around 25 times, and it was always New York, New Jersey. I'm from New York, and so my mom lived like an average of 8 months per apartment, little house somewhere. So, and the story my mom tells is that like, yeah, her father, not in your language, but her father's a professional hunter. They would just like move somewhere, and then like you would run out of money for a few months and have people banging on the door. Then they would move somewhere else. And I think a lesson from my mom is that in and of itself creates a traumatic childhood.
Yeah, I can imagine so. I think, unlike probably that situation with your family, I think there are probably some really bad actors out there that they probably could afford it and they probably could do it, but they enjoy ripping people off. And so
Actually, that's an interesting take because I'd always, again, growing up, always hearing these stories, but not knowing the language, I'd always thought the professional renters were people like my grandfather. He was kind of the guy who would like scrape by, try his best, but it never quite worked out. So they would just move somewhere again and start anew. But I hadn't thought about it about people that have malicious intentions, but that
there's a difference. There's a difference for sure.
And there are definitely lots of people out there with malicious intentions.
Sure, 100%. I mean, I see it all the time, like in markets like Atlanta is a big one. There's tons of scams going on in the housing market in Atlanta. It's gotten
So
really bad.
So I have a question for you. We've discussed some signs that someone's a professional renter, and signs that to us being our ages, I'm 49, are kind of obvious, which is like, now I know, oh, the con man scheme of paying a lot of money up front, obvious to me at 49, or as you point out, being late with the payments or going incomunicado. So those are some signs. What I'm wondering is, are there any less obvious or more subtle signs from the beginning where like people, I don't know, talk in a certain way or have certain type of professions or certain interests or dressing, I or say certain things. Are there any subtle signs that you look out for?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've got a couple of things that I would probably say to that. Number one is, anyone, if just imagine this, if you're a fantastic resident, right, and you know you're going to pay on time, and you know that, hey, I'm looking for a place to live and I've got choices. Great residents have choices. They're not pigeonholed into something, but they don't really need to sell themselves to you. All they really need to do, all they need to do is fill out the application, show you pay stubs, have you call, references, whatever the case is, and they will rent that property. Now, somebody who maybe not be so confident and may need for you to be a little bit gullible would be, maybe they will start telling you this big story. Maybe they start trying to emotionally appeal to you. Well, we've really been looking for a long time. We just really hadn't found any, but this is the place. I can see me raising my children here. Oh, this is going to be the best. Like, you can't listen to any of that stuff. You are a business. So all you care about is, does it work? Like, do they pass the screening criteria? That's why it's so important. So I think that's one thing. If somebody's trying to give you a big story and kind of get you in there. Another thing is, listen.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Before you go to the second one,
I
want to make a comment on that. As a Shakespeare nerd, I enjoy Othello, one of his classic plays, and a detail about Othello that always stands out in my mind is that the bad guy in Othello, his name is Iago, he's the mastermind. That mastermind, everyone starts to hate each other, and that results in everyone dying. And he's like the evil mastermind of Othello. But the interesting thing about Othello is that Iago, the evil mastermind, is known as honest Iago, and he goes around. He's like, yeah, no, I'm honest. You can trust me. You can trust me. But honest Iago, the good guy, actually kind of secretly turns out to be the evil mastermind, getting everyone to do that. So it's a sort of classic literary version of this same sort of pattern. In your language, the way you would say it is, you'd be like, why does this Iago guy need to keep on reminding us that he's so honest?
Exactly. If they're telling me that, then I don't want to talk to them anymore. Why would you just be honest? You don't even have to tell me.
You don't have to.
And so when people say, to be honest, before they say something, I'm like, why do you need to tell me that you're going to be honest? I just assume you're always going to be honest.
There's a quote from Margaret Thatcher that's along these lines that I really like. She apparently once said, being powerful is like being a lady. If you have to say you are, you aren't.
That's right. That's good. That's good.
It's a great line, and it's the similar point. 100%. People who go around being like, I'm honest, I'm powerful, I can do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. Those are the people that are all bark and no bite. And they they don't actually do anything. The honest people, the powerful people are the ones who are low key, just hanging out in the corner of the room.
I heard somebody say one time, the most powerful person in the room is the one with nothing to hide. And I was like, I like that. That's the person who doesn't have anything to hide. They're not running away from anything or hiding anything or afraid of anything. They're just very, very wide open.
If you have nothing to hide, then you basically have nothing to lose. And if you have nothing to lose, then no one can mess with you.
Now, the second thing that I would say, the second thing to your question, I just mentioned one person. Now, I'm not condoning this. I'm not saying, but I know I have a friend who has done this before. And I'm not saying I agree with it, but they would really, if they had two, this is what I would say. If they had two applicants, Morgan, and one applicant was let me just make something up. If one applicant was a doctor and they wanted to rent the house, and the other applicant was a police officer, they would always rent to the doctor. Not because they're more wealthy, not because they have more money, but because they always assumed that the police officer may think that he is above the law. Same thing with a pastor. They would rather rent to somebody, a plumber, than a pastor, because the pastor's always right. And I mean, listen, I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying this is what some people have done. They would essentially, if they're looking at the same application and they're both approved, they would choose one over the other based on profession. This
is fascinating. I'm the president of a synagogue, so like I personally employ a rabbi. I know I'm insane, but your comment on that puts things in perspective, and it is much better for everyone in the universe for me to not comment on any more details. Hey, the weather today is really nice out.
That's right.
Wow, super. So okay, so let me reframe this second point.
Mm-hmm.
Super interesting. You're observing that people's whose professions are about defining what is right and wrong. Like police officers decide what's right and wrong. You know, pastor, priest, rabbi defines what's right or wrong in the eyes
attorneys.
of attorneys. Exactly. Attorneys, judges, and so on. People whose profession is to define right and wrong. It's too easy and natural because they're still human. Too easy and natural for them being, I decide what's right and wrong. I decide what's wrong, to then start feeling like you are above that. And once you feel like above that, that is when bad things happen.
Correct. Bad things happen. Yes, that's exactly what I mean. This is, again, I'm not saying that's, if you've got two of the same application, they're both approved, then you really have a judgment call to make, right? It's really a judgment call of what makes more sense for you.
But by the way, I think what you're actually arguing, so me interpreting, expounding, this is all me, not you, all the smart positive insights we attribute to you, all the misinterpretations are attributed to me, is you're actually making this really interesting addendum to the story of Adam and Eve. So basically, there's all these interesting details and I say it's like I'm a literature nerd, so I'm not saying this in a religious way whatsoever.
Sure.
I'm saying this like analyze it as though it's Shakespeare, Othello, or Hamlet. So like analyzing a piece of literature. There's a whole bunch of super subtle, interesting details to the story of Adam and Eve. And here's one detail that everyone forgets, but I think is really powerful, which is when God says, don't eat the apple of that tree. But what people, when they retell the story, or they just and there's a detail that everyone forgets, which is don't eat an apple, don't eat the fruit of that tree. And the name of that tree that you cannot eat from is the tree of knowing what's good and what's evil. So the punishment of the fall of man is not that that a human disobeyed God, ate the apple, we disobeyed, so we're being punished. No. It's that literally only God has the ability to know or judge what's good and what's bad.
That's
so
true.
The punishment of humans comes because we gave ourselves this godlike power to know what's good or to know what's good or bad. So I think the core lesson of that story is to like fulfill ourselves completely as a human. You just can't judge good or bad. But what happens in the practical world, for civilization to function, there's just certain jobs where you need to do that. You need courts, you need police.
Correct. That's right.
So therefore, people would give and take on that profession for themselves have this like godly like power, and with the godly like power, it's just too tempting mere mortals on humans like us to kind of go too far. Yeah, they won't mind if I pay the rent late.
Right. That's exactly right. 100%. That's a great analogy, though.
This is what happens on Klein Horror Stories. You never know the direction going. We can get wild
I
and
love
wacky
it.
here.
I know. I love it. I love it. When I signed on, I never thought we'd be talking about the Garden of Eden. That's fantastic.
By the way, what I love about the Garden of Eden story, again, analyzed as literature, not religious perspective, there's just like so many subtleties to it that and like the words are right there. The story is literally 20 sentences. But even though you've heard it a million times and you read the 20 sentences when you're in first grade or whatever, that like you're just like you just miss the obvious things it says. Like no one pays attention to the name of the street. Here's another fun example of something that in retrospect is so obvious, but everyone misunderstands, which is the way everyone remembers it and everyone was taught was the snake told Eve to eat the apple, and she did. But it turns out that's not what happened at all. If you go reread it, the snake never says that. The only thing the snake does is he asks some questions. The snake just says, "Are you sure God said that?"
Did he really say that?
Yeah, exactly. Did he really say that? Do you know it's true? Are you really gonna die? And to me, that's so powerful because the simplified version, the snake is evil and taught you to do is don't listen to evil people, is simplifying it too much. Because what it's actually teaching us is that by planting doubt, asking questions, it's the wrong thing in the wrong direction, and just being rational logical, because it's rational, logical, good, and smart to ask questions. How could it be bad to ask questions?
Right.
But asking the wrong question in the wrong way, in the wrong time, the wrong people, questioning the wrong thing, that's actually what leads to problems. And I think me growing up like math sciencey nerd, I ask questions. I want to know. There's nothing to hide. You know, as they say, like the most powerful person is the one with nothing to hide. So answer all my questions. So I know there's nothing to hide. But like that's actually the snake-like attitude that gets you in trouble.
Yeah, I agree with that, Morgan, because I see what I know about human nature is we're all playing stories in our head, right?
Yes.
We're all running stories in our head. We have stories about what's right, what's wrong, what should I be doing, what shouldn't I be doing. Somebody said something to me. What do they really mean by that? Well, I'm going to tell myself a story, whether it's true or not, I'm going to believe it. And so the subtle question that the serpent asked was, did he really say that? It starts to get you to go, well, let me play this story out of my head. Maybe he just doesn't want me to be like him. Maybe he wants to keep something really good from me. And so Adam and Eve kind of started going down that road. And then something else you just said about the most powerful person in the room is the one with nothing to hide. Well, what happened after they ate the fruit? They ran and hid.
Good point.
They lost all of their fellowship, lost all of their power, and they went and hid. And they were like, God's like, well, where are you? You know, I'm walking in the garden. We usually hang out at this time, but you're gone. Where are you? And they were hiding, and they even clothed themselves. And and then the story goes, he actually killed a couple of animals because he clothed them with animal skin. And so we see bloodshed, and even in the story of Adam and Eve. But really interesting points. So thanks for sharing that.
You get like 10 points for remembering the detail that they went and hid themselves and connecting it back to nothing. I totally didn't make that connection. You're one step ahead of me. It's an honor and a privilege to interview on Kind Horror Stories people who are one step ahead of me. I love it.
Great. Well, if you want me to finish my story, I'll go ahead and just tell you the damage of everything. I mean, it was horrible. This is the nightmare, right? The nightmare was that the sheriff is gone. I have to replace locks on the door, and I go into my house and it's completely trashed. And I took pictures. Like I don't know. I don't think I had an iPhone at this time. It was probably early 2008, late 2007. So I know the first one had come out, but I probably took it on like a horrible flip phone, maybe a Razor or something like that back in the day. And I took the picture and I just was like,
one of those Canon digital cameras that you carry around.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I still have the image today. And so whenever I see that image, I'm just reminded, Spencer, like, think about all the valuable lessons you learned. This lesson cost me I don't know, $15,000, $20,000 by the time I rehabbed the property, by the time I counted up all the lost rent, the eviction, all of the brain damage that I went through just thinking about this. But it's a valuable lesson because it allowed me to change some things, and maybe, yeah, it taught me a lot. And like, even to this day, I mean, here I am 15 years later talking about it on a podcast. It had an impact on me. But to me, these are the types of things that nobody's going to tell you, nobody's going to teach you. Now, I do believe with a lot of education out there, a lot of YouTube, there's a lot of good people that are sharing information that can help you be more careful in these situations. But what I have found, especially from investors, real estate investors, is they like to believe the spreadsheet more than the reality of what's actually happening on the ground. And so they just need to be super careful. And that's why, I mean, I don't mind sharing the story because, yeah, it was painful and cost me a lot of money, but it was a growing experience.
Yeah, I think there are a few good points in what you just said. One of them is there are a lot of people, especially investor types, that are kind of math nerds and just think everything reduces to numbers. And if you think everything reduces to a number, you're going to miss the reality of what's right in front of your nose. Because I say it like this: the most important things in life can't reduce to a number. Love, it's literally impossible to what love is 86. Come on. So but like, while that's like a good example because it's so strong and it's so clear that it just applies to everything. If you want to make this, just sit naked in front of your computer and move numbers and spreadsheets and make money. But the way it works to actually build a business or build a hands-on investment, or like an owned and operated investment, is you need to be there on the ground.
Yeah, there's people involved. Anytime there's people involved, it's unpredictable. So when you start adding people to the mix, I mean, you have a spreadsheet, and I've learned that you can torture a spreadsheet enough to make it say what you want it to say. And so if that's all you're going by, it's probably only half true. And I actually just looked at a house today that was about somebody was selling it for $15,000, and it was just a dog. And I'm like, somebody bought this house thinking that they were actually going to do something with it, and what they're about to learn a very expensive lesson, unfortunately. So.
Wow. Yeah. Another subtle lesson there is there are market prices for everything for a reason. So like, when you think you found a good deal, it's less likely you found a good deal, and it's much more likely, what don't I know that explains it. And this applies to investing in everything, not just real estate, but for example, people, marriage. You meet a girl, you're like, oh my God, she's too perfect. Either you won the lottery and met the most perfect girl in the universe, and somehow you convinced the most perfect girl in the universe to fall in love with you, or more likely, okay, like, what are the yellow flags you're not seeing? And because everything's a trade-off, so then you have to identify the yellow flags, because once you can see the yellow flags, then, given that everything is a trade-off, you can then ask yourself, okay, are those yellow flags I can live with? Are those yellow flags that I personally can manage, and so on? But it's just a little bit too naive to just pretend that you found the deal of the century.
That's true. That's a great point. If it seems too good to be true, it probably is.
It probably is. Exactly. And with that, these are great words of wisdom to wrap up the podcast on. Spencer, this was surprisingly fun, a little biblical, but sometimes you just need to get biblical. And it's most important things in life don't reduce to spreadsheets. Excellent learnings.
That's right.
Thank you for your time. It's been wonderful getting to know you. And everyone who has watched it to the end, we hope you've enjoyed it as much as we had. Until next time.
Thanks, Morgan.